Maya Richardson, a black woman and former Delta Force operator, lay handcuffed on the ground, blood streaming from a wound on her head, while 3 white officers stood over her with tasers drawn. The trunk of her rental car stood open and revealed nothing illegal. Officer Gage Rourke called for backup over the radio, his hand trembling. What he did not know was that, just before the body camera footage mysteriously corrupted, Maya had disarmed him in a matter of seconds. The real violence was only beginning, and this traffic stop would ruin careers. Earlier that day, Maya had been driving her silver rental Honda along the quiet stretches of a rural Alabama highway, heading north toward Birmingham to visit her sister Tanya. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and she kept her speed carefully under the limit. She had been back in the country only a short time after her last contract assignment overseas and moved through the southern states with the careful awareness that had kept her alive in far more dangerous places. At a small gas station just outside Montgomery, she stopped for fuel and a bottle of water. The place was nearly empty except for an elderly black man behind the counter and 2 police officers standing beside their patrol car in the parking lot. Officer Rourke, a solidly built man with a military haircut and cold eyes, watched her from the moment she walked in. His partner, Officer Harlan Voss, slightly older with a thick mustache and tattooed arms, nudged him and said something that made both of them laugh. Maya noticed, but kept her movements calm and deliberate. She paid in cash, thanked the owner, and returned to her car. As she pulled away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw both officers watching her vehicle disappear down the road. She noted it mentally, but at first did not give it too much weight. Miles later, the same patrol car appeared behind her. Maya's training activated at once. She checked her speed, confirmed she was driving legally, made sure her seatbelt was fastened, and kept both hands visible on the wheel. The patrol car followed for several more miles, staying exactly 2 car lengths back. Every signal she used was perfectly timed. Every lane change was flawless. She gave them no reason, no excuse, no justification for a stop. Still, the lights came on. Her heart rate rose slightly, but she stayed in control. She activated her right turn signal, slowed gradually, and pulled onto a stretch with good visibility and level ground. She lowered the window, shut off the engine completely, and placed both hands on top of the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. The patrol car stopped a short distance behind her, and both officers stepped out. Voss approached the driver's window, while Rourke circled the vehicle on the passenger side, hand resting on his service weapon. Voss leaned in. His face appeared in the window with an expression that was not professional curiosity, but something far closer to hostile anticipation. His first words were not a greeting, but a demand. "Where are you coming from? License and registration." Maya answered in a calm, respectful voice, explaining that she was heading to Birmingham to visit family. She moved slowly toward her bag on the passenger seat, narrating every motion. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. It's in my bag. The registration is in the glove box. May I get it?" Voss did not answer her questions. He simply stood there, hand already fully resting on his weapon. Rourke had circled the car completely and was shining a flashlight through the rear window even though it was not yet fully dark. Maya handed her license and the rental agreement through the window. Voss snatched them without looking, his eyes scanning the interior of the vehicle. He asked why she was driving a rental. She explained that she had just returned from work overseas and had not yet bought a vehicle. He asked what kind of work. She answered that she was a private security contractor. He asked if she had weapons in the vehicle. She said no. He asked if she had drugs in the vehicle. She said no. He asked if there was anything illegal in the vehicle. She said no. Then he ordered her to step out of the car. Maya knew this was the moment everything could go wrong. She had broken no traffic law. They had no probable cause for a search. But she also knew that arguing with police officers on a lonely rural Alabama road as a black woman could end very badly. She asked politely if she had done something wrong. Voss's face hardened, and he raised his voice for the first time. "I said get out of the vehicle, now." Maya obeyed, moving slowly and deliberately. As she stood on the gravel, Rourke stepped forward to join his partner. Both officers were now very close to her, invading her personal space in a way that felt deliberately threatening. Voss claimed he smelled marijuana coming from the vehicle. Maya knew that was a lie. She did not smoke, never had, and there was nothing in that rental car except her luggage and personal belongings. She stated clearly and respectfully that there were no drugs in the vehicle and that she did not consent to any search. Rourke smiled at that. a cold smile that never reached his eyes. He said they did not need her consent if they had probable cause, and that Voss's nose was all the probable cause they needed. Maya felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her face neutral. She knew exactly what was happening. It was profiling, harassment, and an illegal search about to unfold, and there was nothing she could do to stop it without making the situation worse. That was when the third vehicle arrived. A larger patrol SUV stopped behind the first car, and Sergeant Trent Hale stepped out. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that comes from years of unquestioned authority. He walked toward them with firm steps, and both Rourke and Voss straightened slightly. Hale looked at Maya with undisguised contempt, then asked his officers what they had. Voss explained the stop, mentioned the smell of marijuana, and said the suspect was refusing to cooperate. Maya tried to object, to clarify that she had cooperated fully and had simply refused consent for an illegal search, but Hale cut her off with a sharp gesture. He walked around her car once, peering through the windows with his flashlight, then returned to where she stood. He claimed he could see what looked like a weapon on the back seat through the window. Maya's blood ran cold. There was no weapon. She knew there was no weapon. She had packed her own bags and carried nothing illegal. It was a blatant fabrication, a lie designed to justify escalation before she could respond. Hale already had his hand on his service weapon and ordered her to get on the ground. His voice was hard, authoritative, the voice of someone who expected immediate obedience. Maya's military training collided with her survival instinct. Every part of her knew how to respond to a threat, how to assess danger, how to neutralize an opponent. But she also knew the reality of being a black woman on a southern road facing 3 white officers who were clearly looking for an excuse. She knelt. Then she lay face down with her hands open on the gravel, the stones dug into her palms and her cheek. Hale's boot pressed into her back as he pulled her arms behind her to cuff her. The pressure was excessive, painful, designed to hurt. When the metal handcuffs locked around her wrists, she heard the crackle of Hale's radio in a brief transmission. It was a sequence of numbers and a coded phrase that made her entire body tense. She recognized it from classified intelligence reports during her Delta Force service. It was a communication protocol used by a specific network, one that had been identified as a white supremacist organization that had infiltrated various law enforcement and military units. The coded phrase meant a coordinated action was underway. This was not a random traffic stop. It was not even ordinary police corruption or typical racial profiling. She had been deliberately targeted, and these men were part of something much larger and far more dangerous. Hale's knee drove harder into Maya's back as she lay on the gravel, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. The pressure on her spine increased until breathing became difficult, and she could feel every individual stone pressing against her cheek through the skin. Voss moved to search her vehicle while Rourke stood guard, hand still resting on his weapon as if she represented some imminent threat despite being completely immobilized. Maya forced herself to stay calm and focused. She knew any resistance would be used as justification for even greater violence. She spoke clearly, voice steady despite the pain. "I have broken no law. I do not consent to this search. I am being detained illegally. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." Hale responded by pressing harder, shifting his weight until his entire body mass concentrated on the small point where his knee dug into her back. He leaned close to her ear and told her to shut her mouth before he shut it for her, his hot breath against her face. The smell of coffee and tobacco was overwhelming. He called her insolent and added words she had heard before, insults designed to dehumanize and degrade her, words that reduced her military service and professional achievements to nothing. Maya bit the inside of her cheek, focusing on the physical pain to contain the rage growing in her chest. She had survived combat zones. She had faced enemy fighters who tried to kill her. She had operated in some of the most hostile environments on the planet. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way combat never had. These were men who were supposed to protect and serve, wearing badges that were supposed to represent justice, and they were attacking her specifically because of the color of her skin. Voss had opened the trunk and was pulling out her luggage, unzipping bags, dumping the contents onto the ground. Clean clothes scattered across the dirt. Toiletries rolled down the slight slope. He handled her belongings with deliberate carelessness, as if they were contaminated simply by having been touched by her. Rourke joined him, and together they systematically destroyed any sense of order, searching for anything they could use against her. Hale struck her, a calculated blow to the kidney area that sent waves of pain through her torso. He claimed she was tensing, resisting. It was not true. She had remained completely still, except for the shallow breathing his weight allowed. He struck her again, harder this time, and she could not contain the grunt of pain that escaped her lips. The sound seemed to satisfy him. He told her that was what happened to people who did not respect law enforcement, to people who thought they were too good to cooperate. Rourke found her military discharge papers in the glove box, pulled them out, and began reading them aloud with growing surprise. Honorable discharge, United States Army, Special Operations, multiple decorations for valor and service. He looked at Hale with something that might have been doubt, as if maybe they had the wrong person, as if perhaps this was not what they had signed up for. Hale's reaction was the opposite. His entire bearing shifted from casual cruelty to focused hostility. He took the documents from Rourke's hands and read them himself, jaw tightening with every word. Instead of reconsidering the situation, instead of acknowledging that they were assaulting a decorated veteran who had served her country with distinction, he seemed to see it as a challenge. He made a comment about soldiers who thought their training made them better than real law enforcement, about military people who came home thinking they were special. He folded the papers and stuffed them into his pocket, telling Maya she would have to earn them back. Voss let out a low whistle from the back of the car. He had found something, and from the tone of his voice, it was exactly what they had been hoping for. Maya's stomach sank. She knew what he had found even before he said it, the envelope containing cash she had earned through legitimate contract work overseas. Money she had withdrawn to help Tanya with her mounting medical bills. Her sister had been diagnosed with lupus, and the treatments were expensive even with insurance. Maya had promised to help, and cash was simpler than international transfers that took days to clear. She had carried documentation proving the legitimate origin of the money, bank statements and contract payment records showing exactly where every dollar came from. Voss held up the envelope like a trophy, smiling widely. He announced they had found drug money, large amounts of unexplained cash, evidence of criminal activity. Maya tried to speak, tried to explain, but Hale increased the pressure on her back until she could not take enough air to form words. He ordered Voss to count it and prepare the civil asset forfeiture paperwork. They were going to seize the money, file their claim that it was alleged drug proceeds, despite having found no drugs, no paraphernalia, absolutely no evidence of illegal activity. This was theft under color of authority, and they executed it with a casual efficiency that suggested they had done it many times before. Maya managed to force a few words between gasps. Medical bills, my sister, documentation in the center console, legitimate money, bank records prove it. Voss retrieved the documentation she had mentioned, a folder containing bank statements, contract documents, even a letter from Tanya's doctor detailing treatment costs. He glanced at them briefly and then looked at Hale with raised eyebrows. Hale did not even bother to look. He snatched the papers from Voss's hand and tore them in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. He said people like her always had a story, always had excuses, always claimed the money was clean when everybody knew the truth. His tone carried absolute certainty, as if her guilt had been decided in advance no matter the evidence. The scraps of paper settling on the gravel felt like the last remnants of due process being discarded. Rourke's body camera, which had been recording since the initial stop, suddenly emitted a beep. He raised his hand and touched it, frowning. The small light indicating recording went out. He mentioned that it seemed to be having some kind of battery problem even though it had been fully charged. Voss checked his own camera and reported the same issue. The footage was buffering, he said, not uploading correctly. Technical difficulties. Hale was not wearing a body camera at all. He said his had broken the previous week and the replacement had not yet arrived. 3 officers, 3 cameras, 3 simultaneous failures. The probability was virtually 0. Maya understood with absolute clarity that this was planned. They had deliberately disabled the cameras before escalating the situation, ensuring there would be no video evidence of what came next. She was alone on a road that was beginning to darken, with 3 corrupt officers, no witnesses, no recording devices, and no way to prove what was really happening. The fear she had been suppressing finally broke through, cold and sharp. This was not going to end with an illegal search and stolen money. They were creating the conditions for something much worse. Hale ordered Maya to get up, his voice carrying the same hard authority he had used throughout the stop. As she struggled to get her knees under her body with her hands cuffed behind her back, he grabbed her arm and yanked her upright, roughly and deliberately, making her lose her balance and stumble before she could fully regain her footing. His baton came down hard on the upper part of her back. The impact was unexpected and brutal and sent her back onto the gravel. Her head struck a rock and immediate hot pain exploded across her face. Blood ran down the side of her head, warm and thick, dripping onto the stones beneath her. Voss stepped in and kicked her in the ribs, not hard enough to break bones, but hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. He called her a name that made her flinch more than the physical blow, a racial slur delivered with casual hatred, as if she were less than human. Rourke stood several feet away, face pale, hands clenched at his sides. He looked as if he wanted to say something, to object, to stop what was happening. But fear, loyalty, or training kept him silent. He simply stood there watching his partners assault a handcuffed woman who had committed no crime. Maya's vision blurred from the head wound, and she could feel blood pooling in her left eye. The metallic taste in her mouth told her she had bitten her tongue when she fell. Every instinct she had honed through years of Delta Force training screamed at her to fight back, to defend herself, to neutralize the threat. She knew exactly how to disarm Hale from that position. She could calculate with precision the movements needed to reverse the situation. But she also knew what would happen if a black woman defended herself against police officers in rural Alabama. She knew how the story would be told. She knew she would be lucky to survive, and if she survived, she would spend decades in prison for assaulting an officer. So she stayed on the ground, motionless, and endured. Still, Hale continued circling her, breathing hard, working himself up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, keeping it hidden in his palm. Maya could not see what it was, but she understood the implications perfectly. A throw-down weapon, a planted gun or knife that officers carried for moments when they needed to justify excessive force, something they placed near a suspect's body and then claimed the suspect had threatened them. She had received reports about this practice during intelligence training. She had seen oversight committee reports investigating suspicious police shootings. The pattern was always the same. Unarmed suspect, aggressive officers, a convenient weapon that appeared after the fact. No one could ever prove it had been planted. Her life was about to end on that road, and there would be no justice, no accountability, not even an honest account of what had actually happened. Hale leaned closer, bringing the hidden object near. This was the moment. In a few seconds, he would claim she had tried to grab a weapon. In a few more seconds, one or more of them would draw their service weapons. In a few more after that, she would be shot. Maya made a decision. Survival overrode caution. Training overrode fear. She was not going to die on that road without a fight. When Hale leaned toward her, she executed a movement she had practiced countless times in training and had used successfully in real combat. Her body twisted despite the handcuffs. Her legs rose and closed in a scissor motion that trapped Hale's wrist. The object he was holding flew from his hand and landed in the grass several feet away. Before he could react, she twisted further, using core strength to sit up, while at the same time driving her knee into the pressure point on the inside of his elbow. His service weapon came free of the holster, and Maya's cuffed hands closed around it. She rolled away, created distance, and rose into a defensive stance. The entire sequence lasted only seconds. She held the weapon pointed at the ground, hands clearly visible around it, finger off the trigger. Her voice was steady despite the blood running down her face. "I do not want to hurt anyone. This is self-defense. You assaulted me. I am defending myself." Voss went for his weapon, instinct and muscle memory taking over. Maya moved like water, like smoke, like nothing they had ever faced. She closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Her cuffed hands rose in a precise strike that hit the nerve cluster in his forearm, and his weapon fell. She caught it before it touched the ground. She pivoted away from his attempt to grab her and used a textbook joint lock to send him to his knees. 2 seconds. 2 officers disarmed. Both weapons now in her possession, both pointed safely at the ground. Rourke stood frozen, face drained of color, hand hovering near his own weapon but not drawing it. Maya looked at him. "Don't," she said quietly. "Please don't make me do this." He slowly raised both hands, empty. Hale was struggling to get up, face contorted with rage and pain. Maya kept both weapons trained downward, her posture defensive, her voice still calm. "I am a decorated veteran of the United States Army. I was traveling legally. You stopped me without cause, assaulted me, planted evidence, and were about to execute me. I have every right to defend my life. I am going to walk away. You are going to stay where you are. If you follow me, I will treat it as a continued threat." She backed toward her car, never turning her back fully, never lowering the weapons until she was inside. She started the engine with difficulty because of the cuffs, managed to get the car into gear, and drove away, leaving the 3 officers in the growing dark. What followed was a desperate flight. Maya knew the coded radio transmission meant the network would mobilize. She discarded the rental as soon as she could, obtained another vehicle through a contact from her contractor days, and began moving carefully north, using every skill she had learned in special operations to stay ahead of the manhunt. She reached out to the only people she trusted, former teammates and a small number of investigators she knew were clean. One of them was Agent Lena Vale of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Another was Colonel Avery Lang, a career officer who had worked quietly for years documenting white supremacist infiltration in military and law enforcement units. They believed her immediately. The coded phrase she had overheard matched intelligence they had been tracking. The pattern of targeting black veterans who had spoken against extremism inside the ranks was already known to them, though never proven at this scale. Maya turned over everything she had: the cash they had tried to seize, the torn documents she had managed to recover, the detailed account of the radio transmission. Rourke, the officer who had not fully participated in the assault, eventually came forward. His conscience, broken by watching a restrained woman nearly murdered and then watching her spare their lives when she could have killed them all, drove him to contact Vale. His testimony, combined with the gas station security footage that the elderly owner, Jerome, had preserved despite pressure, began to crack the case open. The network responded with violence. Jerome's gas station was firebombed. He survived with serious burns. Maya went public in a national interview, calm and precise, refusing to be silenced. She appeared again after the attack on Jerome, speaking directly to the camera. They had tried to kill her on that road and failed. They had tried to silence witnesses and failed. Now the hunters had become the hunted. Later, she testified before Congress in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, the scar on her forehead still visible. She named names. She read the names of other veterans who had died under suspicious circumstances. Colonel Lang corroborated every detail. Rourke, under a cooperation agreement, filled in the internal structure of the network. The hearings produced the most significant law enforcement reform legislation in decades: mandatory body cameras that could not be disabled, independent review boards, whistleblower protections, and systematic screening for extremist infiltration. Sergeant Hale and Officer Voss received long federal prison sentences. Dozens of others were arrested. The infrastructure of the network was dismantled. Maya, still uncomfortable with celebrity, founded a consulting firm with Lang and others to help agencies identify and remove extremists. She established a scholarship fund for the children of black veterans who had been killed or falsely imprisoned. Her sister Tanya received the medical help she needed. Jerome recovered and reopened his station with community support. On the steps of the federal courthouse after her testimony, surrounded by cameras, Maya spoke one final time. "I was trained to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is what I did on that Alabama road. I defended it from enemies who hide behind badges and flags, who wrap themselves in authority while betraying everything that authority is supposed to represent. Equal justice under law means something, and I will keep defending those principles every day until the work is finished. Not only me, but everyone who believes law enforcement must serve and protect all people, not just some. Everyone who understands that our military veterans deserve respect and protection, not targeting and elimination. Everyone who knows that telling the truth should not be a death sentence." The work is not finished. The conspiracy we exposed was large, but there are others. Racism and extremism did not disappear because we arrested some corrupt officers, but we proved something important. We proved that even when the system is compromised, even when powerful people want you dead, even when the odds seem impossible, resistance is possible. Truth can prevail. Justice can be served. It requires courage. It requires allies. It requires refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. But it is possible. To other veterans facing discrimination or persecution, you are not alone. Report it. Document everything. Find trustworthy people to support you. Do not stay silent out of fear. The protections we fought for exist because people refuse to be silenced. Use them. To the families of the victims who did not survive, I am sorry we could not save your loved ones, but their stories helped create change that will protect others. Their deaths were not in vain. We made sure of that. And to the people who tried to kill me, who attacked Jerome, who targeted veterans for telling the truth, your network is broken, you failed, and we are still here. We are still fighting. We are still winning. Maya Richardson turned and walked away from the cameras, security around her, head high. The words carved into the courthouse facade stood sharp against the white stone. Equal justice under law. For the first time since that night in Alabama, she believed those words might one day become real, not because the system had corrected itself, but because people like her had forced it to change. The ending was not perfect, not tidy, not free of ongoing challenges, but it was real. Justice had been served, however imperfectly. Lives had been changed, though not without cost. The system had been reformed, though the work continued. And Maya Richardson, who had survived an assassination attempt designed to silence her forever, had become a voice that could not be ignored. She had fought against overwhelming odds and won, not only for herself, but for every person who had come before and every person who would come after. That incomplete, ongoing victory meant something. It meant hope. It meant that change was possible. It meant that telling the truth, however dangerous, could make a difference. The story would continue. Other struggles would come. But on that day, standing in the sunlight, after testimony that would reshape American law enforcement, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had survived. She had fought. She had won. And she had made certain that others would have a better chance of surviving too. That was enough.